This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
And welcome to it 6 minutes after on this Tuesday. It's the Steve Gruber Show. Thank you for dialing it in. I feel like I might be getting that first tickle in my throat of the season. How lovely, right? Last year I had that, they call it the 100-day cough. Yeah, it was like being penalized every day. Fortunately, we won't have that happen this time around. At least I don't think so. And, we'll just see how that plays out. Coming up today on the program, Dr. John Lott will be here to talk about a couple of things. First of all, California putting background checks on purchasing ammunition. The next step in gun control, the gun control they said they would never pursue. Yeah, the gun control they said they would never pursue. Well, they're pursuing it fairly vigorously. We'll also talk about the abortion doctor here in Michigan who had a trunk full of dismembered babies in jars. We'll have that. We'll talk a little bit more about that with Senator Pavlov about how did we get to a point in our country that, having a trunk full of dismembered children is even possible. Not okay, but just even possible. Should break your heart, honestly. And a lot of politics heating up. Of course, Hillary Clinton will be in front of the Benghazi committee here this week. Paul Ryan is gearing for the speakership potentially in the House of Representatives. And it seems that Joe Biden's ready. And then he will make an announcement probably tomorrow. At least that's the way it seems. Seems that Joe Biden is going to jump into his candidacy and run for president. He's been taking some shots at Hillary Clinton. And that could happen in the next 24 hours. Now, I have said for a while now that Joe Biden was going to get into this race, but the timing is getting close. He's sending out an unmistakable forget-me-not plea for 2016, brushing past signs of a Hillary Rodham Clinton resurgence with fresh and direct suggestions he could be on the verge of entering the presidential race, and that's what people on the inside are saying. His political team broke its months-long silence just a day or two ago on the subject with a letter circulated by one of Biden's closest friends and top advisors. In the letter, though Biden remains officially undecided, former Senator Ted Kaufman describes a campaign from the heart that Biden would wage and says a decision isn't far away. Now, if he decides to run, which I believe he made this decision long ago, we'll need each and every one of you yesterday, said Kaufman. To its recipients, Biden's former Senate, White House, and campaign staffers, the letter late last week smacked of an unambiguous indication Biden was all but green-lighting a presidential campaign. Several individuals familiar with the letter say it was circulated with Biden's blessing. The individuals not authorized to comment publicly. Valerie Jarrett likes Joe Biden. And Valerie Jarrett is the one that's going to be, the one on at the White House on the inside that'll basically make that call for the White House. And make no mistake, she does not like Hillary Clinton. She detests her, frankly. Already this week, Joe Biden has been placing calls to top Democratic strategists in early primary states such as Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina to solicit candid assessments of his chances. Biden's team has also had detailed conversations, that is, with campaign data and analytics experts to determine how quickly he could ramp up the digital side of his campaign. Now, for those that are backing the vice president, including those in the draft Biden super PAC, those signals serve as the reassurance they were seeking that their enthusiasm has not been misplaced. I told you long ago he would get in the race, and I further said, if he gets in the race, I believe he will get the nomination. He's referred to as a dark horse, but, well, they win sometimes. Crazy things happen. Look at the last play of the football game on Saturday. Crazy things can happen. You have to be in the game, though, for it to occur. Meanwhile, Paul Ryan, seeking the speakership. Paul Ryan, the congressman from Wisconsin, who was Mitt Romney's running mate in 2012, originally said he would not run for the seat being vacated by John Boehner. But now he is apparently considering seriously the idea of getting into that race. But according to CBS News, there's one potentially a big mess in front of him. Ryan's confidence tells CBS News that he will not horse trade with the House Freedom Caucus, a group of 40 or so deeply conservative members who have been demanding changes to House rules and other very specific promises from candidates for Speaker in exchange for their support. Ryan's confidence say he is not going to negotiate for a job he never sought, and that he has a record of conservative leadership that should be clear enough to every member of the GOP conference, and I would agree with that position. I wouldn't be held hostage by these guys. I just wouldn't. They say Ryan hasn't, and I understand they have some good ideas, and I hear you. I understand. But they're also making it impossible to function. The Republicans, that is. They're making it impossible for the Republicans to function, to do anything. And I understand that things have to change. And I understand, because we talk about it here, that things have to change after the 2014 November elections. And nothing has. But you can't get anything done if you're in a state of chaos the entire time. Now, Ryan has not ruled out a meeting with the House Freedom Caucus if asked, but he's not going to go to the Freedom Caucus and say, I'll do this, and I'll do this, and I'll make you a bunch of promises. I think if he goes and says, I'll do my best, and, I'm the guy that put together a budget plan, I'm the guy that ran for vice president, I'm the guy who is a conservative, I'm the guy from Wisconsin who has worked on reform measures all over the place. I guess we'll see. And meanwhile, George W. Bush, well, this is kind of cute. George W. Bush says that, he just doesn't like one of the presidential candidates. He doesn't like him at all. That being one of the senators from his state, that, of course, Ted Cruz. George W., I just don't like the guy, is what W. said about Cruz. He ripped into Cruz at a weekend gathering of donors at his brother's presidential campaign, according to a report that came out yesterday. I just don't like the guy, is what he said, and said it in Denver, and I guess he's on the record now, isn't he? It's 14 after on a Tuesday. We'll be right back.
The Steve Gruber Show. American values with Midwestern common sense.
Shout it out loud.
It's 18 after. Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show. If you'd like to join the conversation, we encourage that kind of participation here. 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. I don't know if we can top what we had yesterday on the program. But we sure do our best. We can do a little bit better than yesterday. They have pretty interesting phone calls yesterday. Right now, shifting gears to our good friend, Dr. John Lott, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, and he's traveling today, as he often does. He was in Michigan last week testifying about gun-free zones. And welcome back to the program, Doctor.
Oh, great to talk to you again, Steve.
So I had one thing I was going to talk about here, and then I saw this other thing pop up, and I found it more disconcerting to me, and that is gun control advocates launching a new regulatory push in California to impose first-in-the-nation instant background checks for ammunition sales, not for gun sales, for ammunition, saying you can't buy so much, and you'd have to turn in any so-called large-capacity magazine. Anything holding 11 rounds or more would have to be turned in, and changes in laws. But for a long time, I've thought that, the way that they being the anti-gun forces, would eventually get some movement is to go after the ammunition. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the key thing is to realize that these background checks, if you're talking about a gun, at about at least $60, $80 in New York, higher amounts in some other places to a purchase price. And so if you're going to have a background check that has to be conducted for buying ammunition, that's a pretty hefty effective tax that you're imposing on top of the cost of buying ammunition. I mean, if you have to pay an extra $80 to go and buy ammunition, over and above what would have been the cost of ammunition, my guess is for a lot of people that would effectively double the price or more of the ammunition that they were going to be purchasing.
Do you think it's good politics? I mean, you look at Hillary Clinton, Governor Martin O'Malley, who's running for the Democratic nomination. He's got like 2 supporters, but nonetheless, he said his number one enemy that he's proud of is the National Rifle Association. Hillary Clinton said something about the same. Do you think it's good politics for these two to attack the NRA? It has not worked historically, and historically there's more support for gun ownership and support and so forth today than there has been in a long time, maybe in my lifetime. Is it a good idea?
Well, I mean, part of it is you want to gin up the base. And, I don't know whether it's changed, but there's a possibility that people on the pro-gun control side feel more strongly about the issue than they used to. But you have to understand there's also huge amounts of money that are going to be spent in this presidential race focused solely on gun control issues, and there's going to be a huge number of studies that have been funded by Bloomberg and others that are going to be coming out and getting a lot of attention over the course of this next year. And so, you and I might not take them very seriously, but most people will at least hear them. And when you talk about the uncritical coverage that they get, and each one of these things may get 2,000 or 3,000 news hits across the country, it adds up at some point. And maybe they're betting about what the impact is going to be by the time they get to November, or possibly they're just looking at the primary campaigns. But in either case, whether it's Bloomberg's $50 million a year, and that's just counting how much he's spending on every town, or Soros's money, or the other
I do have
money that's going in there, it's a lot of money.
I have one study here that has not been paid for by Bloomberg or Soros or anybody else, and that is the FBI crime reports. It's the adjusted NICS versus violent crime in the USA comparison. If you compare the number of background checks, therefore the increase in gun ownership over the last 15 years from 2000 to 2014, there has been an increase in background checks by 82%, while violent crime has declined by 18%. I mean, it's an inverse proportional relationship, it seems.
Right. Well, I mean, it seems like there could be a relationship there. I'm not sure I put a lot of weight on just one place that you follow over time. I mean, one of the advantages of living in the United States is we have 51 different laboratories, and so you can go and get a lot more information and try to account for a lot of other factors. I'm not saying that what you're saying is wrong. I'm just saying that it's not as convincing as when you can go and look at the data across a lot of different states and to see how that's related to crime rates. Are the states that have had the biggest increases in gun ownership, do they have the biggest relative drops in violent crimes? And I think there's evidence for that.
I think it is interesting, though, that it's the FBI statistics, and I know you've looked at these statistics in detail, in depth over time. And these are some of the key factors in some of the conclusions you've reached about violent crime in America, that it's on the decline. And you can't deny, Doctor, and we're on with Dr. John Lott, that gun ownership is increasing and violent crime is decreasing. I mean, that's pretty clear, isn't it?
Right, no, it is. I'm not saying, the question is what's the causation that's going on there, and other things are changing, and I'm just saying you can get a lot more accuracy in terms of figuring out what's going on when you have a lot of different experiments, because it allows you to disentangle a lot, what happened to arrest rates or conviction rates, what happened to the lengths of prison sentences in different places, other factors that you can think of, different type of policing strategies that are being tried. And when you're looking at something for the United States as a whole, there could be a relationship there, but I'm just cautioning that you can test a lot more things when you're dealing with more disaggregated data.
Sure. Well, Doctor, I know you're traveling today, and I appreciate you coming on a little bit earlier than normal, and you're off in the wild blue yonder again. Dr. John Lott, always a pleasure and always an education.
Great to talk to you.
There you have it, everybody. You can find out more at the Crime Prevention Research Center. That's crimeresearch.org. Crimeresearch.org to find out more about John Lott and his work. We'll be right back on The Steve Gruber Show.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is The Steve Gruber Show.
All right, it's 33 after the hour. Welcome back to it, my friends. The hotline number is 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. So, Hillary's going to be going in front of the Benghazi committee here. And isn't it interesting how she said, well, I want to do this and I want to be completely open. And this is, the path that I want to take, of course, because I want to be right out there. And I want to be transparent, and I want to be, the person you can trust. Mm-hmm. And then as we get close to the hearing here, then we should get rid of this committee. And then it's attack the committee, and it's a bunch of disingenuous hoo-ha. It is what it is, right? Anyhow, Joe Biden is considering a run for the White House now, as we were talking about here just a few minutes ago. He's very close. You know that he's been considering making this run for the White House. Well, Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, former presidential candidate as well, was a guest on Fox News with Greta Van Susteren, and he says he thinks VP Joe Biden will run and explained why he thinks so.
Oh, I think he's running, and I think he's running partly as an insurance policy because Hillary may well collapse at some point. I think he's running partly because as she moves to the left, she's taking positions that are increasingly at odds with the Obama policy. And if you'll notice, 90% of Obama's major fundraisers have not committed to her. 90%. That means that there's a huge group of potential fundraisers who are waiting for the Obama candidate. And I think the signs are the Obama candidate. Secretary Clinton has had a bad couple months. She has decayed. In one study that I saw, when you ask her name and you do word association, the word liar comes up as the most frequent single word people associate with Hillary Clinton. So if you're Joe Biden watching that, you're thinking, hey, there is going to be an opening here at some point.
Yeah, there's going to be an opening at some point for sure. By the way, Newt Gingrich is going to join us right here on the Steve Gruber Show. What is it? Is that next week?
Yes, next Thursday. We get the pleasure of asking him questions ourselves.
Yeah, we'll have a conversation with Newt Gingrich next Thursday for a half an hour, actually. It's not just for 5 minutes.
Yeah, we have him and his wife on the program.
And why is that, Ivy? Why are they on the program? I mean, because they love us. I get that. But more importantly, they have a book to sell.
Yes.
Or is it 2 books?
2 books.
Yeah, they have
He's
2
written
books
one
to
and
sell.
she's written one. Yes.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I get the way the game is played, and whenever these folks have books, it makes them more accessible because, well, it puts money in his pocket. But Newt Gingrich, go ahead and write that down. Tell your friends. Class will be in session next Thursday about history and the contract with America. What's going on with, the speakership? What he thinks about outgoing Speaker John Boehner. A whole host of questions will be on the table.
We should also, we're only a couple days away from booking Ted Cruz as well. So we should.
Yeah, for all you Ted Cruz fans who said, why haven't you had Ted Cruz on? All right, I heard you. All right. George W. Bush will not be asking the questions. Apparently, George just doesn't like the guy. That's what he said at a little get-together. So okay, let's go. We'll quick jump off to the hotline here. We've got Brian in Southern Michigan waiting patiently there. Brian, welcome to the program.
Hey, good morning, Steve. You know, you got communists and communist light running on the Democratic side, and I got a way for them to mix their whole thing up instead of doing the boring, monotonous thing they've been doing. I saw a commercial the other day on TV where they have these inflatable things you jump into. I think that all the candidates on the Democrat side should jump into those and ram into each other, and the one that ends up winning ends up being the nominee. It'd be a good hoop for the American people, and, you know, you never know who would win.
Well, you know, I can't remember what those things are called. You and I were in those things. You know, the big inflatable ball thing you bounce off each other.
Yeah, those are actually quite fun. I have no idea what they're called, but...
Yeah, they're quite... Thank you, Brian, for checking in this morning. Brian, Southern Michigan. You can check in as well, 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. But I'm going to go back to, in all seriousness, although his idea would be visually entertaining and interesting, I'm going to go back to the fact that I think Joe Biden, I think Newt Gingrich is, I think he's right for a couple of reasons and wrong for one. Biden isn't just an insurance policy. Biden thinks he can win, but it's right about why. Because if Biden doesn't get in now and Hillary collapses, which is, you know, a distinct possibility. I mean, if something comes out from the FBI, she's done. She's toast, right? So if he doesn't get in now, he can't jump in January or February. It doesn't make sense, right? So I guess what I'll go out on a limb here and say is this. A lot of folks have been talking about a brokered convention for the Republicans because there are, 27 candidates running for the GOP nomination. But a brokered convention for the Democrats could be likely as well. If Hillary Clinton doesn't come out of there with a strong majority, if her and Biden run down to the end, or she has some sort of FBI scandal that causes a campaign collapse in support, it could be the Democrats looking at a brokered convention just as much as the Republicans. I mean, that's just the way it is.
There may be some interesting things that also come out of this continued, Benghazi investigation as well, because I was reading an article yesterday of just how immense the pressure is on Trey Gowdy and how just it's like been the last worst times of my life the last few weeks, just because he's gotten so much heat over, this investigation.
He's good at it, though. He can handle this. Trey Gowdy can handle the pressure, I believe. And he's told Republicans, in fact, Trey Gowdy has this to say about Hillary Clinton and her testimony coming up in just 2 days now.
I think it's pretty clear that whatever they might have thought they were doing, they ended up becoming a partisan arm of the Republican National Committee with an overwhelming focus on trying to, as they admitted, drive down my poll numbers. I will do my best to answer their questions, but I don't really know what their objective is right now.
Yeah.
I get that there's a presidential campaign going on. I have told my own Republican colleagues and friends, shut up talking about things that you don't know anything about. And unless you're on the committee, you have no idea what we've done, why we've done it, and what new facts we have found. The 7 members of my committee are much more focused on the 4 dead Americans than we are anyone's presidential aspirations.
And there you have it. That's why I like Trey Gowdy. Here's the thing. Republicans were out there talking about things that they should not have been, as he mentioned there. But Trey Gowdy's a former federal prosecutor. He's a pretty straightforward guy. Does he have an axe to grind? I don't think so. Hillary says it, but that's part and parcel. That's the Clinton playbook right now, and it always has been. That's the Clinton playbook going back to Arkansas. Deny, and then when you can't deny any longer, attack. And hope at some point that the public just becomes flat out bored with the conversation. Hope that the controversy has played itself out to the public and they get bored with it. and then nothing really comes of it. I mean, this is the way that they conduct themselves of scandals going back to the 1970s. Yeah. Yes, the Clintons have scandals going back to the 1970s. It's 41 after. We've got some other things to talk about when we get back, including El Nino in California and climate change with your president. Straight ahead on the Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
Oh, now. I got a feeling when the sun comes up.
45 after. Hey, it's Tuesday, and listen, we encourage you to get involved in the program. The Common Sense Hotline is 888-900-9966. This hour of the program brought to you by Mesa. Good health, good business, and great schools. Yeah. So, being taught in schools, of course, is climate change all the time. Much to the chagrin of people that actually, don't agree with that point of view. And there are a lot of really qualified scientists who believe that it is overstated, exaggerated. And I think that I think I'd said this a long time ago. I'm more of a global lukewarmist. It's true. I mean, is the world getting warmer? Of course it is. Why do you think the woolly mammoths died and the mastodons are dead? And they found the dead woolly mammoth down there by Chelsea because the climate changed and you had this big fur coat on. It was too warm and he keeled, right? Heck, 10,000 years ago, or I guess 12,000 years ago now, where we're sitting here in southern Michigan, it was all covered with ice. How do you, a product of global warming is a great thing we like to call the Great Lakes. Mm-hmm. The Great Lakes are a product of global warming, as is the Mississippi River and a lot of other great things, right? So I guess I'm a global lukewarmist. What I mean by that is, the climate's getting warmer, but I'm not in full-on panic because it's not because I'm driving an SUV, and it's not because I have refrigeration at home. And the mean air temperature is going to go up, an inch per century, a degree per century. Go ahead.
Interesting. We were on the phone, and this is a complete shoot off here, but talking about energy, to consumers yesterday, and they do this thing when they have shortages.
It was now, and I don't think a lot of people know that. You're talking about the increase in charging.
Yeah.
Right.
Because what they do is they don't have enough people to come out to your home and to actually physically check your meter.
So they guess.
So then what they do is they give you an average of what they think you used
from last year, usually
from the following,
and then they add about 10 or 15% is what we learned. Year to year they add, and then during the summer, here's what happened. During the summer, they penalize you for going over a certain amount of electricity usage, right? You pay extra, and if they're estimating that you went over, then they add this penalty on top of that, and then bam, you're hit with it, right?
And we wouldn't be any of the wiser, although we had some problems logging in, so we called, and she said, "Oh, your bill is estimated, and really this is the actual reading, and so let's decrease your bill by $200."
Right, because they took the penalty. First of all, they took the cost off of there. Then they said, "Oh, you shouldn't have been in the penalty phase," so the penalty came off, and before you knew it, we saved a couple $100.
So all of you out there, if you have consumers, make sure you look at your bill really closely
for the summer, because you end up paying. If you go over in the summer, they charge you extra. So and speaking of that. Which is a good tip, Ivy. And we saved a couple $100 just because their website wasn't working properly. We had to phone in and got a lady on the phone. I said, "By the way, why's my electric bill so darn high?" And she said, "Well, we got into a conversation, and she shall remain nameless because she was very helpful and customer service was terrific yesterday at Consumers. But she is just as scared as we are about the cost of electricity for next year with all these power plants closing and so forth." Mm-hmm. Let's see, though. President Obama did meet with executives at a roundtable at the White House yesterday, part of his efforts to enlist corporate America in this push, this blind faith towards climate change agreements and so on and so forth. Here's part of that conversation.
This conversation has confirmed what we've known for quite some time, which is that considerations of climate change, energy efficiency, renewable energies are not only not contradictory to their bottom lines, but for these companies, they're discovering that it can enhance their bottom lines. For decades, our addiction to fossil fuels, to imported oil, I think not only threatened our planet and our security, but also our economy.
All right, stop.
And
that's just stupidity. The fact that's aggregated stupidity. The fact of the matter is, America runs on vast quantities of cheap energy. We have more oil now in America than all of the rest of the world reserves combined. Do your homework, check it out. It's true. We have more natural gas, more oil, more coal, more timber, more farm ground. That's great. We have more natural resources than any piece of real estate in the world. And this idiot is driving us deeper into debt every day, $18, $19, $20 trillion, when we have the ability to feed the world, to power the world, to light our own world. You know, it's sickening to me. Now, before we run and we talk about climate change and so forth, the folks in California, oh my God, it's climate change, it's a drought. No, it has a lot to do with sun activity or lack of activity. It also has a lot to do with ocean currents. And now they say, I've got a prediction here from April. From April that said that California's drought would end by this fall going into the winter. This came back in April, and people laughed it off. Well, guess what? It's probably going to be coming to an end, their drought. Roll it.
What we see is record sea surface temperatures across the equator, which is translating into some extreme weather conditions, and the high probability for higher precip, especially in Southern California. And with the latest Climate Prediction Center forecast, some of the higher percentage on precip is moving farther to the north, which is good for California to address these drought conditions. Even though we anticipate high rainfall and potentially catastrophic flooding throughout this state, the California's been through historic drought conditions that took us 4 years to get where we're at. So even though we might end up this wet season with full reservoirs, streams, and rivers, it doesn't mean the drought's going to be over.
Hey, just because we have water, pal, doesn't mean the drought's over. Just because our reservoirs are full doesn't mean that. What? I'm not real bright, Ivy. Can you help me with that? Just because our reservoirs are full and we've gotten lots of rain, that doesn't mean the drought's over and the world is still going to hell. Is that what I got out of that?
Yeah. There's just not a lot of common sense there. But
just not a lot of that.
But interesting that El Nino in the Pacific could mean a mild winter for Michigan.
That's why they're saying that, too. It's a real nice couple of days coming up for the next couple of days. I don't know if it'll hold through next week and Halloween, but it sure is nice right now. Highs in southern Michigan, 65 into the low 70s today. Enjoy it. Get outside. Heck, call in sick. I won't tell anybody.